Hello, my name is Jeremiah Senkpiel, but many know me better as Fishhawk123, since that's what I go on GitHub and Twitter and just about everyone else on the web. So if you want to tweet me or something, that's my Twitter handle. And I work on Node Core. And so what that means is I do a lot of issue management, review a lot of pull requests, and general coordination, and I also actually do node releases. Also, I have a hedgehog distraction, because I have two hedgehogs who are really great and completely relevant to this talk, and definitely have everyone's attention now, right? Super cute hedgehogs. So, my talk is called Contributing to Node Core. And so you might say, well, what exactly do we mean by Node Core? What we refer to as Node Core is the Node.js runtime, specifically the source that the executable is built from. And you can find that at nodejs/node on GitHub. But this project will also be, this talk will also be about the Node.js project in general. And there's a lot of places in the greater Node.js project to also contribute that surround Node Core. And you can find the Node.js project now at github.com/nodejs. And that's where all the translation docs, working groups, and core and everything around it reside. So contributing to Node Core. Why would you want to contribute to Node Core? If you're here, you probably either use core, or use Node.js, or you're probably considering using Node.js maybe. So wouldn't it be better if it was, nicer to use, if it was more powerful or had better docs, or whatever you might imagine? When you think about why, think about like that one thing that really bugs you about Node.js. Like, what if you could make that a little bit nicer for yourself and for other people? And this is an actual thing you can do. You can help make it better. Node Core is not an exclusive club. We have 52 collaborators in total on Core itself. And those span many countries and many languages even. And since Node version 4 launched 2 months ago, we've had 142 unique author commits. And even we recently onboarded 3 womenized collaborators because we have to start somewhere. But Node Core is a little frightening. It's a little bit spiky on the outside. It's kind of like my hedgehogs. They can be really spiky, but once you kind of get your hands around the spikes and underneath them, they're actually pretty easy to pick up. And Core is a little bit frightening. You have to get past some of those spikes. And the truth is, I'm probably a lot like you. I think I'm an okay programmer, but I'm not some ninja rockstar developer hero, and you don't have to be. And quite frankly, it's questionable if those even exist. So, how I got started. In December 2014, io.js came around, and it came around as a bunch of things that I'll talk about in a minute. But it felt more welcoming, more open. It felt like there was a place I could somehow contribute to this now. But in December 2014, I had no idea how to contribute to Node Core. If you go and you look in the source tree, you'll see all these folders, and then a bunch of capitals files yelling at you, and it's a little bit overwhelming. So I helped start iojs.org because that's what I could manage at the time, and that's okay. And then later on, I began helping out on the issue tracker and started getting past some of those spikes. And people actually saw value in that. And I was onboarded as a collaborator to Node Core. And then a little bit later, as I was working more on core, I was nominated to be added to the releases team to make Node.js releases. And you don't need to be a part of any technical committee to do this. Any collaborator that's on Node core that wants to and has time to make releases can do that. I was also added to the TSC later on because I was able to be active enough for that. And I will be on the TSC panel later today at the end of the conference. So I'll be there. I think it's the only thing at the time anyway. And really, I'm still probably a lot like you. Even though I'm on the TSC, like I still think, you know, I'm an okay programmer, maybe. So the state of contributing now, what's it like? So a little bit on how we got here. Sometime 2014 mostly, this thing came around. Some people might recognize that logo, but it's not, wasn't hugely widespread. And it was called Node Forward, and it asked some questions about how can we improve Node for the future? And then there was a bunch of bike shedding, and we ended up with this io.js thing late last year and into earlier this year. And it brought in concepts of open governance and how people can become involved better in this project and in projects in general in the Node community. So contributing now, in the github.com/nodejs, the Node.js Project, if you look back at this slide, down at the bottom I've highlighted in red that there's actually 412 people that now are in the project in some form or capacity helping out. And Node.js Project, the GitHub org houses core and all of the working groups and everything sort of surrounding Node.js as a project. So working groups. What are these working groups? So working groups are autonomous projects that address specific issues. And I will go over a couple in a minute. But the Node.js project, of course, also houses what we refer to as Node Core. And Node Core now has 52 collaborators, as I mentioned, and also 13 TSC members. And CTC members. I believe James Snell mentioned that at his keynote, the difference between that and the technical steering committee. The CTC is about core in particular. TSC is a bit broader than that. So, and we're looking to always grow that and looking at better ways. And that brings me to onboarding collaborators. There's an actual process for this now, although it's not greatly documented, and we're always trying to improve it in how we see we might be able to based on past experiences. And after this talk, I'll actually be onboarding 3 people sometime around lunch who have been active in helping out, and we're going to bring them on and so that they can do that more readily. So what do contributions look like? How do people get started in this sort of thing? A lot of people get started by helping out in a working group of some sort. And there are a whole bunch of those. There's stuff that surrounds our build infrastructure. There's a working group for the website. There's a working group for streams in particular. There's stuff for the add-on APIs, for Docker, for all the translation groups, translation language groups. Another great way that people often get involved is through the docs. We're always looking for help with that. And a couple of people even, including myself mostly, get involved by just helping out on issues and sometimes reviewing pull requests. And that's also something we value if that's your kind of thing. Another thing is on the core repository, Node.js/Node, we have a good first contribution label that when we see issues that we think someone could handle reasonably, we try to tag them with that so that people can go through that and look for stuff that's easy to do, relatively. We also respect, though, that not everyone has time to do this. I have time to work on core. But not everyone does, and we shouldn't expect you to. However, there are actually other ways to help out. One great way is to help make your modules, if you have them, smoke testable, so that we can download them off of NPM and run automated tests to make sure that any changes we make, we can gauge the impact of what that might be, and make sure everything's running properly across the ecosystem for releases. That's really important. So you can help us help you in that respect. Also, our build and testing hardware, basically all of it is community donated in some way or form, but most of it, like for OS X and Linux and that sort of thing, is donated by companies. However, ARM hardware in particular, such as Raspberry Pis, is almost entirely donated by individuals. So that's a great way if you don't have time to help out, but you want to donate a Raspberry Pi or something like that, it's a good way to help out too. So contributing to Node core. I'm going to go over what sort of contribution for that might look like and how you might go through and sort of figure out where things are to actually contribute to Node core. So a little bit about core structure to make some sense of what's there. There's a lot of folders and, again, a lot of capital files and a whole bunch of configuration in dot files and whatnot. But at first, the things you probably want to pay attention to the most are the /doc folder. That's where all the documentation lives. The API docs live in there. Also, /lib is where all of the JavaScript code lives, or at least like 99% of it. And then source is where any C++ code that we need to compile lives in. And tests is where the extensive testing suite of, like, I don't know, we have like 900 tests that run in parallel or something that test like all parts of Node. But it's always better to get more of those. So for docs, when you go to nodejs.org/API, where the API docs live, that is taken directly from doc/API in the Node.js source tree. So if you edit anything in there, the next release we make, that will get pushed up to the website directly. So there's no need to worry about anything in between. And that means that the docs on the website, or at least the API docs, are always in sync with what's in our source tree. So another thing to note, since I talked about JavaScript and the C++ being sort of separate, most of Node is actually in JavaScript. I talked to a good amount of people, and not everyone knows that most of Node is in JavaScript. They think it's in C++, but it's actually not. Most of it's, including the dependencies and stuff, but actually most of core itself too is written in JavaScript. So as an example, let's try to make a pull request. So I looked through the good first contribution labels this morning, and I found something that says add buffer hash includes. So the hash there, in case not everyone knows this, I didn't at first. The hash there means this is buffer.prototype.includes. So an includes function that's on the buffer instance that you might make. And someone already has taken this PR, but it's a great example, so I'm going to share it anyway, what it looks like. And the reason we might want to add buffer hash includes is that includes is a thing that's being brought in with ES6, and that's going to be on all arrays and typed arrays and whatnot. So to keep consistency, we might want to add buffer includes to our API too. So if we look into our important folders, a good bet is that it's going to be in lib, because Node.js is mostly JavaScript, and most of the JavaScript lives in lib. So if we look in there, we will find a file called buffer.js. And that's where most of the buffer code lives. And there's some other strange bits in there, but you end up finding that there's a buffer constructor that's in this file, and it does some prototype stuff on it. But we know that this is the buffer that's being exported, and that there's a prototype on it, and we can assign something to it. So if we look down a little bit further, you'll find that there's an index of. And most people, when they need to do includes, because it's not in the language right now, will do buffer.index of equals -1, or whichever way you need to do it. But this is already there, so we don't need to replicate this again. We can just wrap that, and there's our includes function in a nutshell. It just checks the same thing you would normally check, but it does it and wraps in this function that's like ES6, and it's in those language specs, so we might want to replicate that. And this is really small, but an example that most of Node core is written in JavaScript, no matter like which complexity it is. Like, there's obviously stuff that's a lot more complex. I've actually dealt with a good amount of stuff in the REPL that's really not that complex at all once you kind of get into it. And you don't need to know C++ for this stuff. There's a little bit more to a PR. You do need to write some docs and some tests, but we can help you out with that sort of stuff, and we can even help you out with these if you want to make one and you ask. So we still need to do better on all this. Node isn't perfect. We need better docs surrounding processes so that people can actually understand that you can become a collaborator, and that's not a particularly difficult thing. We also need less internal knowledge, and we're trying to do this to bring in sort of internal style documentation so that we can explain things and why things are certain ways in great detail. And we also need more inclusivity and diversity, and we are trying to work on that. So thanks. I have like 3 minutes for questions. My voice is inevitably going hoarse, and you can tweet me at fishrock123. Any questions? So the question is how I helped out with issues when I was starting. And basically what I did was just looked at issues that I sort of knew what was going on and just tried to help point people to making sure they provide the right information, answering it if I could, and also reviewing what PRs I sort of kind of understood. Because sometimes when you look at just a chunk of code in a PR, it's a lot easier to understand than looking at an entire file. Any other questions? In the back? Can you talk more about work groups, how those form and work? Yep. So working groups, we have a whole bunch of them. So anyone can form a working group with a couple people to try working on something. And then later on, if it's seen as valuable, we can actually like charter it so it has authority to do a specific thing. But those are completely autonomous, chartered or unchartered from the rest of everything else, and they only need to connect when they need to connect to everyone else. So you can, like the tracing working group has meetings sometimes, and they try to figure out stuff for how we might do tracing in the future. And eventually they might come out to us with a proposal saying, this is how we think tracing might work. Can you sort of check out this? Because we've kind of worked on this. Usually for a working group, you don't need to fork the repo. If you need to do any core work, you can just work on it on your own. But you'd usually, if you have like a couple people, you'd ask to make a repository in the Node.js repo. You can probably ask on like the TSC. There's a Node.js/TSC repo. That'd be a great place to ask for a repo. Does that answer your question, or any others? I have like 25 seconds. No? Okay. Well, thanks. And feel free to come talk to me after or anything else.